We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the radio show discussing the honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with John Tillman, President and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute, illinoispolicy.org. John, we still have, of course, a budget impasse between Governor Rauner and Chicago Democrat legislative leaders. One of the things that Governor Rauner has proposed is, okay, you guys don't want to get serious about constructing a constitutionally balanced budget, then just empower me to do it, and I'll take over the responsibility that you have eschewed.
I'll be the grown-up.
And so what of that? What of the governor deciding to or suggesting that he's willing to shoulder the entire burden if legislative leaders aren't willing to deal with him after one overture after another over the course of much of the last year?
I think it's a really smart move by the governor for a host of reasons, but the biggest one is that it reveals the truth of the Democrat obstruction. It's not about public policy. It's not about improving the quality of lives of the people of Illinois. It's not about actually solving the big structural problems we have. It's about a battle for power going forward and who's going to control it. Because if you really cared and were cowardly in taking votes, this would be a great out. But it's not actually about getting the out. It's about trying to break Rauner's will and break his support among the people of Illinois. So he's revealed them to be that. I think they need to do a better job, actually, of explaining that to the people of Illinois.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a secret. The House sponsor of that legislation, one of the House sponsors, is State Representative Margo McDermott. She's a freshman from Will County, from Mokina, and she joins us now. Representative McDermott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
So explain, add a little bit more color to the bill that you sponsored and its likelihood of serious consideration in the General Assembly to give Governor Rauner the power he suggested he is willing to take on if Speaker Madigan and John Cullerton do not want to deal honestly about the budget.
The name of the bill kind of says it all, the Unbalanced Budget Response Act. Last summer, the Democrats passed those 22 spending plans. You can't call it a budget because there was no attempt to address revenue whatsoever, and a budget implies that you address both sides of the balance sheet. But when they sent those 22 spending plans to the governor, his ability to line item veto them and come into balance is significantly limited by laws that are on the books already in the state of Illinois. And guess what? The Democrats knew it. Even though they say on the floor all the time, well, the governor could have just line item vetoed. We don't know why he had to veto the whole thing. That's not true. In fact, they set him up. They knew exactly what they were doing. The only way he could have made changes in those unbalanced spending plans was to cut the things that weren't already dictated by legislation, which was largely education. So they set the governor up to veto the area that's most important to him. So this is the governor's response to that setup.
Well, and Margo, so just picking up on that, in district in Will County, you, I'm sure, hear from social service providers, you hear from your K through 12 school districts, and they're, I'm sure, likely pressuring you, hey, we really need a budget, just like legislators throughout Illinois are being pressured. So what do you do in terms of response to that pressure you're receiving from stakeholders in the system that provide quality services, whether it's the schools or social service providers, who can't make heads or tails of who the responsible party is for why we're at this impasse and why their bills aren't getting paid?
It's always important to take one step back from the immediate fight. And if you take one step back, you see that Illinois has been in financial trouble for decades, actually since the turn of the century. And the only way to change our downward trajectory is to have some underlying reform of the system that drives costs. And that's what the governor's turnaround agenda is intended to address. Now, it gets demonized and misconstrued, but basically what we're talking about is changing the underlying drivers of cost, the huge pensions, the multiple raises for state government employees, the lack of addressing any kind of fraud in the system, and all those things that drive costs. And if we can make some of those changes, and some of the changes are for business, that have told us over and over, we'd love to stay, but we can't stay because of property taxes, workers' comp costs, tort costs. We know exactly what we need to do to turn the state around, and yet there's no political will to do it.
And we have to be honest about this, too, with those that have bills in arrears. And suggest, look, there's going to be people taking haircuts because of how bad the financial condition of the state is, built up over decades and decades, as you are describing. No one is going to be insulated from pain, and perhaps there would be some currency, political currency, to be derived from leveling with people in a way they haven't been leveled with by the political elites in the state in a long time.
When I go and talk about this to groups, including groups of providers, everyone always says to me, Margot, thank you so much for telling the truth. No one has ever told us this before. I find that baffling. Nothing has changed in a long time in the state of Illinois, and yet no one ever went and told these people, whether they're the community college people or the service providers, that this is what's happening, and that's what the governor's asking for, because we can't tax or cut our way out of the situation that we're in. We have to grow our way out of this situation. If we can grow our economy, we can generate more taxes, we'll have more money for human services.
Representative McDermott, you're a freshman. I'm curious in terms of speaking the truth. What has been the most shocking thing that you've experienced in Springfield that people don't understand about how corrupt the culture is down there? And I'm not talking about illegal corruption. I'm just talking about sort of the mores of Springfield and why it is so difficult to turn the Titanic away from the iceberg.
John, what shocked me, and I consider myself to be politically knowledgeable, but what shocked me is that the Illinois House of Representatives is not governing at all. The Illinois House of Representatives is being used, it's being exploited as an arm of the Democrat political machine in the state of Illinois. We are not allowed to govern. We are only allowed to be used to create sound bites and votes that can be used for Democrats and against Republicans in the next election. We are being used as a tool for the next election. We're not looking at the big picture. We're not looking at the long term. We're only a political tool, and I hate it.
And we're talking to Representative Margot McDermott, Republican freshman from Mokina. And Representative, before you were elected, you were a longtime corp counsel for a big oil company. And so I wonder if the leadership of a big corporation that you worked for acted in the same fiduciary manner as the leaders in the General Assembly, what would have happened to the leadership of that big company?
There are so many laws at the state, federal, and even international level that govern that kind of behavior that it wouldn't have been tolerated. And of course, one of my jobs as a lawyer was to call them on that. One of my main jobs was compliance for 30 years. And calling people on their behavior and saying, that's against the law. You can't go there. You can't do that. And so, I found people responded. People wanted to obey the law.
Perfect training for Springfield. That's against the law. You can't do that. That has to be said a lot.
Well, I think also
I actually do say that a lot on the floor. I don't think people care for it too well.
Well, I think the other thing that is going on here that is hard to sort of get your head around, but Dan's question brings us to the fore, which is there's clear mechanisms of accountability in the private sector, but in the government sector, particularly in this legislature, accountability is diffused and delayed. So it's very hard for people to connect the dots that the main obstacle is Speaker Madigan. It's Speaker Madigan who controls the House. He controls that caucus. He's the one who sets the rules, and he's the one that uses it for a political tool to advance his own power agenda.
I say that all the time, and I guess Illinois voters are in denial. I just don't think they believe that anyone in the United States of America can hold that kind of unfettered power.
Yeah,
That's why people are surprised when I tell them, and they're like, no one told us the truth before.
They haven't noticed the same guy in charge for the last 3 decades. Yeah, there's a little
Nothing to see here.
A little bit of Naked Gun movie going on here. All right, she is State Representative Margo McDermott, freshman Republican from Mokena. Representative McDermott, thanks so much for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.